One of the most exciting aspects when revisiting older platforms is discovering hidden gems you may have missed during a console's life cycle. While I have done 2 episodes covering approximately 20 hidden gems total, I wanted to discuss 10 more that I discovered on the console. So sit back, relax, and let's check out even more hidden gems for the GameCube. First up is Rogue Ops, published by Kemco and developed by Bits Studio. This stealth-based third-person game has players in control of Nikki, an operative who lost her family and is dedicated to avenging them. This game feels like a nice blend of Splinter Cell and Metal Gear Solid, but also feels very much like its own identity. While sneaking around to complete objectives, Nikki has a tech visor that lets her see through walls to see if enemies are patrolling around the vicinity, and it really does come in handy. Nikki can sneak up on enemies and pickpocket them for key items, and can also take them out by breaking their bones in these QuickTime events that are actually pretty cool to see in action. While this is a stealth-heavy game, you can also go full-on action if you're spotted. There are even sequences in between that are just complete action. Controls are fairly solid, but they take a little getting used to since there's no dedicated jump button, and these actions are all context sensitive, as long as you look directly at what you're trying to interact with. I do like that you can actually expand your radar to help see a larger radius on the fly, and seeing the enemy's field of view, much like the Metal Gear series. Visuals are pretty good as well, and while it tries to hit 60 frames a second, it's inconsistent in doing so. Audio is pretty solid as well, with music constantly playing during the levels, and audio effects that do a good job for immersion. However, the voiceover work in the cutscenes are heavily compressed sadly.
Glad to hear it.
Compared to the field, Nikki, this place is like a kindergarten.
The overall gameplay though is very enjoyable, and I was quite engaged during my time playing this. If you're a fan of stealth games and are looking for something a bit fresh, definitely check this one out. Next up is Freaky Flyers, published by Midway and developed by Point of View. So this is a game that always intrigued me back in the day, between always seeing it at stores and the vast amount of magazine ads for this. Freaky Flyers is what happens when you take the flying mechanics of Diddy Kong Racing and make an entire game using those mechanics while infusing a Saturday morning cartoon aesthetic and humor. This game has you choose from a wacky cast of characters, each with their own cutscenes and introductions, and partaking in an adventure of tackling races that contain bonus objectives as well. During races, you have your machine guns that can be used at any time to take out opponents temporarily, while being able to pick up a variety of other weapons for single use, much like other kart racers of its kind. However, as mentioned, there are bonus objectives within races that net you the ability to carry more weapons during a race if completed. These objectives vary based on the level, such as shooting a certain number of objects or collecting X amount of collectibles. Levels are massive and provide a ton of freedom, but not to the point of feeling like there's no sense of direction. There's a ton of variety in each locale, and discovering the different paths is quite addictive. In between races, there will be mini-games that change up the pacing as well. For example, this minigame here has you defending your fort, but destroying the mariachi's forts that are trying to invade yours. I love the idea of these minigames that separate races, and they're very comical as well. This is easily a hidden gem that I cannot recommend enough that people check out.
Return the chief to police headquarters. You've rescued the police chief.
Next up is Fireblade, published by Midway and developed by Kuju Entertainment. Coming from the same studio that later went on to make Battalion Wars, Fireblade is an arcade-style helicopter combat game that is just a blast to play. This feels very much like a modernized take on the Strike series of games like Desert Strike, Jungle Strike, etc. Gameplay is fast-paced and frenetic, but also blends a bit of stealth by initiating Fireblades' stealth mode, which makes the chopper go invisible and fly quietly and slowly. But it's the game's sniper mode that really makes this a unique experience. Using this sniper mode, you can either fire EMPs or single shots when combining it with the stealth mode, or you could just mow down enemies with precision. Speaking of mowing down, dismembering ground troops was something I was not expecting to see, but damn, this is badass. The game has quite the variety when it comes to objectives throughout the missions and helps provide a fresh experience throughout your entire playthrough. I do wish the game had a co-op mode though, because man, this would be a blast to have a buddy tag along for double the fun. Visuals overall get the job done, and while not the prettiest looking game, it holds a stable 30 frames a second. Audio does a good job of immersing you into the action as well, with a very suitable soundtrack. There's even a documentary in this game showing the technology powering our military helicopters back in the day, which is pretty fascinating to watch. This is definitely a hidden gem that I highly recommend, especially if you were a fan of the Strike series of games back in the day. Next up is XGRA Extreme G Racing Association, published by Acclaim and developed by Acclaim Cheltenheim. A follow-up to Extreme G3 on the GameCube, this installment looked to bring more fast-paced futuristic motorcycle racing action that fans adored from previous installments. The controls have been tightened up from its predecessor, and the weapon system has changed quite a bit as well. As you speed through various tracks, you can collect weapon power-ups scattered throughout the levels, and each pickup acquired upgrades to a certain weapon as shown on the list on the top of the HUD. However, if there's a certain weapon or item you want, you can press a button to lock that item in place for use, regardless if you're getting more pickups. Additionally, this is the first time in the series that you can go off the track and actually race off-road. It's not often, but it's definitely a nice addition to the racing aesthetic here. The game also adds on-screen banter amongst racers, which is a fun addition to make it feel like races are more personal. These games have always been known for their bumpin' techno soundtracks, and this one offers an option to either have dance music or rock music, which is a first for the series. The songs used here are good, but they're nowhere near as noteworthy as Extreme G1 on the N64, as well as Extreme G3 on the GameCube. While I will state that Extreme G3 is a better overall experience to me personally, XGRA is still a really fun time that I deem a hidden gem, as this was also the last we saw of this series. Next up is Vex, published by Acclaim and developed by Acclaim Studios Austin. Vex is a game that always caught my attention back in the day. It looked like an edgy platformer that also still had this vibrant and charming appearance all at the same time. The game begins with the Astani tribe village being attacked, and Vex's grandfather Vargas saves his life, sacrificing himself in return. In Vex's escape, he discovers Astani war talons that grant him great power, and it is here that you go on a journey to avenge Vargas's death. Outside of the somewhat dark story, the gameplay overall feels very reminiscent to Super Mario 64, just with a combat system in place. Vex can dish out combos on enemies, knock them into the air, and slam the ground, just to name a few moves. Combat is very easy to grasp, and feels quite satisfying too. As you explore each level, you must collect Wraith Hearts, which open up new levels to explore in the process. Each level has approximately 10 Wraith Hearts to collect, and this setup is what reminded me of Super Mario 64. When highlighting a Wraith Heart to acquire, you are given a hint as to what you need to do to find it. While you can acquire any Wraith Hearts in a level based on how you go about exploring it, finding one will bring you right back to the hub immediately. I will say, the platforming and controls are quite good for the most part, but the camera can be a bit finicky at times. Also, this game can be quite challenging. For example, this area here has you trying to hit 4 different switches to drop these platforms, but if you fall to your death, you will need to restart from the beginning of this whole process. Frustrating? Sure, but old school in design. My time with Vex so far has been great, and this is one I feel many either never got around to or never heard of at all. If you're a fan of platformers, I highly recommend checking this one out. Next up is ESPN International Winter Sports 2002, published by Konami and developed by Konami Osaka. Now, here is a game that I originally wanted to do a review for, but realistically, I don't think many would willingly watch a review for this if they came across it, but hear me out. While this sounds like a typical generic sports game, this is one of the most fun multiplayer experiences you can have with friends, but equally as addictive as a single player experience. International Winter Sports 2002 is Konami's winter version of the track and field series, with all the rapid button pressing we've come to expect from that, as well as various other gameplay mechanics across the events. Here you have downhill, slalom, K90 ski jump, K120 ski jump, moguls, snowboarding, speed skating, curling, bobsleigh, and figure skating. While the events vary in enjoyment factor, with some ranging from excellent to downright awful, I'm looking at you curling, the majority of events are addictive to try and master. This is not an easy game to nab gold medals by any means, and will require lots of practice to perfect your runs. More so, if nabbing the gold medal isn't enough, setting world records will put your skills to the highest test. There's a championship mode for both men and women, which feature a few different events between the two, and getting first place overall in these modes will also unlock hidden characters to play as. Seriously though, events like downhill skiing and bobsleighing alone, I've spent countless hours perfecting, as well as snowboarding. This is such a hidden gem for the GameCube, and one that many brush off as a generic sports title, but if you're in any way a competitive player, I cannot recommend this enough. Also, I promise much laughter will occur if you're playing multiplayer with friends. Next up is Army Men RTS, published by 3DO and developed by Coyote and Pandemic Studios. The Army Men games have seen a variety of different games surround their IP, but realistically, it wasn't until Army Men Sarge's Heroes released that the property became more well known. Taking place within that universe, Sarge and crew must work together to face off against the Tan Army, as well as a former Green Soldier gone rogue that is now leading the Tan Army. Now, I'll admit, I was skeptical of this one, as strategy games like this normally aren't my style. However, after giving it some proper time and acclimating to the mechanics, I have to say, I never would have expected this to be as addictive as it was. The game reminds you in the intro that these are toys being played with in a backyard, but you are in full command of what the troops do. Seeing everything from an overhead camera angle, you will select your units and command them on where to move and who to attack. You can build up your base at the start of missions, and depending on what you build will affect what you're able to craft. You can create more soldier units of various kinds, vehicles, fences, guard towers, and more. I will say, the controls take some getting used to, especially in the heat of battle. As you move units around the map, you will then be able to see more of what lies ahead. Simply moving the camera around the map won't show you enemies right away. They'll need to be within a certain radius for your units to see them. The game also throws mission variety by sometimes only allowing you to control Sarge and crew, where there is no base building and requires a little bit more skill when commanding only a few members out in the field. Now, while there is another RTS game on the GameCube that I preferred more, which was Goblin Commander, that I covered in my Halloween episode, what's here is a very competent RTS game that does a great job of utilizing the Army Men license. Next up is Sega Soccer Slam, published by Sega and developed by Black Box Games. Now, here is a game that I feel flew under the radar heavily. Developed by the same team that made one of my favorite sports games, NHL Hits 2002, what they did for hockey there, they did for soccer here. Sega Soccer Slam in many ways feels like a precursor to what Super Mario Strikers became inspired by years later. Choosing a team consisting of quite a cast of characters, this 3v3 arcade-style soccer game is all about no rules and doing whatever it takes to score goals. You can slide tackle opponents or even punch them out of the way. Depending on the team you choose, players have special abilities they can use out in the field and makes your shots stronger. You can charge your shots as well, which looks pretty stylish when shooting a fully charged shot. Additionally, there are highlight shot moments here as well. When you see the team's logo hovering on the field, you can run in there to initiate a stylish slow-mo shot, which lets you manually aim at the goal. Also, when your special meter is full, you can do a killer shot kick. Here, you lob past the ball in the air, and the other player on the team needs to line up to where it'll land, in which you'll aim and shoot the ball towards the goal. Both of these look awesome in action and feel immensely rewarding to pull off. The game has a good amount of modes too, and the main quest mode lets you upgrade your team and player of choice. Additionally, there are mini games interspersed between games and provides a fun way to earn more cash for upgrading. The game just oozes character and the visuals are so vibrant. Overall, this is an over-the-top sports game that many slept on and truly deserves to be checked out. Next up is Freestyle Metal X, published by Midway and developed by Davis Studios UK. This motocross game is one I've always thought was a racing game back in the day when I'd see it in stores, but I finally got around to trying it out more recently to only discover it's actually an objective-based trick-style game. Aside from some real riders to use here, many of the characters are original creations to play as. You'll explore fairly open areas with a variety of objectives to complete. I will say, the dialogue is hilariously delivered, especially the first level's sexual innuendos.
Come on, baby. Show me the pipe. Complete 5 loops inside that big drainage pipe.
Levels are littered with collectibles and power-ups as well, and you can use cash to buy new bikes and complete objectives to earn attribute points to upgrade your rider. As you advance, objectives will become more challenging, but they are fun to tackle. This one here, for example, is essentially a platforming mission where you need to make your way up the mountain and test your traversal skills. Aside from objectives to complete, there are other events that you can tackle like big air events and race events, or you can also just simply free ride the area. Additionally, there's even a level editor mode, further adding to the game's longevity. Now, I will state, Freestyle Metal X is a pretty ugly looking game. The frame rate and draw distance are often inexcusable, as are the NPCs, and it feels like a very poorly optimized N64 game at times. However, there is a trade-off. All the levels are interconnected on a single map. This aspect is actually pretty impressive, considering that each level is big as it is. Controls also take some getting used to, as grinding rails and pulling off tricks feel a bit stiff, but that's the thing. Despite these issues, what's here is a really fun time, and I had a hard time putting this down. The soundtrack also helps tremendously. When a game starts off with Kickstart My Heart by Motley Crue, you're in for a banger time. While it's not the greatest motocross game on the GameCube, it's a mindless fun game that's well worth checking out.
Shiny things are pretty. If you really liked me, you'd get me that big ol' shiny Metal X.
And wrapping things up is Serious Sam Next Encounter, published by Global Star and developed by Climax. A spin-off to the originals released on PC back in 2001, Serious Sam Next Encounter has players venture through different eras in time as a space-time flux appears to be occurring that Mental's little minion started. Now, this FPS is one that is all about fast-paced action from start to finish. It plays very much like a 90s PC FPS, similar to Quake in terms of frenetic gameplay and having to constantly keep moving around. The developers over at Climax were heavily inspired not only by the original Serious Sam games, but also GoldenEye, Perfect Dark, Contra, and a few other titles when making this installment. Serious Sam's gunplay and controls are excellent to say the least, and it relies on a combo and point system. Killing 20 enemies in quick succession initiates a super combo in which Sam can run much faster, guns fire at a faster rate, and the damage is heavily increased. This only lasts for a short time and will have to be built back up again via the combo system, but this delivers such an adrenaline rush when you earn it. Sam gets a variety of weapons, and some weapons allow you to change the ammo type as well. He can even dual wield certain weapons, and seeing you shoot dual Uzis sideways is pretty badass. There are even moments of driving vehicles within missions, which is a nice touch. Also, if you couldn't tell already, the enemies in this game are pretty absurd. The headless guys with bombs for hands running at you kamikaze style while shouting as they run toward you is both terrifying and hilarious at the same time. Additionally, the whole game can actually be played in 2-player co-op. The game is a bit repetitive, sure, but the gunplay is so much fun, it's so easy to just keep playing it. This is one that has gone up in price a bit, but by far one of the bigger hidden gems on the platform. Discovering titles that you missed out on back in the day, or titles that you never really gave the time of day, is one of the most exciting aspects when revisiting classic consoles. While there are always titles that we look back at with nostalgia, there's no denying the charm in finding new experiences that you never realized were quality ones all this time. As mentioned at the start of this episode, I've done other hidden gems videos, so if there's a few you noticed that weren't mentioned here, maybe they were mentioned in the previous ones. I will leave links for those in the description down below if you're curious to check those out. And that's the thing, while the GameCube didn't have the largest library compared to its 6th gen competitors, there are still a ton of hidden gems on this platform. So, have you played any of these games? Any that caught your attention? Sound off in the comments below, as I love to hear your thoughts. I hope you all enjoyed, and I will catch you all in the next episode.